stole my thunder because I was saying that I literally told my pastor yesterday that I thought the New York case was a proxy war for the California situations going on. And just to see how the Supreme Court's going to respond to it, how they're going to react. So now they already know, like, oh man, this might not go too well if we take it to DC without some more issues, but or not issues, but you know.
Yeah, what's interesting is that the Supreme Court had already ruled similarly. I think not a written ruling, but last year in Nevada and in California, they had indicated which kind of direction they would take. So now the Supreme Court has kind of reversed course, and obviously it's owing, I think, a lot to the new member of the Supreme Court.
She's making ripples, man. She's making ripples.
That's
but
right.
Gorsuch is not going to be on Robert's Christmas card list. That's for sure. I think
that's
they
right.
take each other off each other's Christmas card list. And I just read today that, of course, we know about Governor Newsom getting caught at the French Laundry. The mayor, I want to say of San Diego. I gotta go back and look. The mayor was also there the next night. Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, these are things that are not going to bode well for them in court, I wouldn't think.
Not even a little bit. Not if it gets this far, because as we just mentioned, the Supreme Court is telling them they have to go back and reevaluate it. So it's not just like, now they didn't slap it down completely, but they did tell them you have to go back and reevaluate it. And this stuff is going to come up. Like,
you better believe it. Yeah, and what you said about the ripple effects, that's exactly how this article put it. It says the High Court's one paragraph order Thursday hints at the possible ripple effects of its decision last week, blocking strict capacity limits on New York churches and synagogues. So yeah, that's a good way to put it. Amy Coney Barrett, is definitely having an effect already, because the Supreme Court was 5-4 in the other direction before. It was already so close. So it was easy to tip the scale the other way.
And now, this is going to be so interesting how this all pans out. But I don't know how it's going to actually come together into what's going to be the final product. What's it going to look like when it's all over with and done? So
yeah, the interesting thing is the timing too, because both of these articles that I read in my last video talk about that the Supreme Court sending it back to California during a resurgence of COVID-19 cases. So the timing is so fascinating, because the cases are rising technically, but now the court is actually re-examining the approach that the state is taking. And I think some of it's going to, you talk about how is it going to pan out. Some of it is going to have to do with what are the actual death rates, what's the actual death rate and the fatality that results from COVID-19. That's part of it, because you can have a lot of cases, but you really have to look at what is the effect of those cases. So that's going to be something. And then, of course, I just think in general, like you said before, you have governors taking certain actions, and then, they're being inconsistent, not only in how they treat different entities, but they also themselves aren't also following their own protocol.
And just to jump in, to me, cases doesn't mean anything. I just wonder if we could rewind time, 5 years or whatever. What was the last big pandemic? Swine flu, avian flu, all these different flus. I'm pretty sure if we were testing like we're doing now, I'm pretty sure we would see cases then. So I don't know if cases mean as much as you said. I hadn't heard a death rate in a good hot minute. I just hear total death rate, you know, which is still bad. A death is a death. I'm not trying to minimize that.
Mm-hmm.
However, a case, just saying so and so has a case of coronavirus, and we've all heard of people who've had coronavirus and they're still doing life. They're still, I mean, they're working from home, but they're sick, but they're not on their deathbeds. I'm not trying to minimize people who have had to go to the hospital or have had some really major complications with it. But that happens with every sickness. So again, the notion that it's just cases, we have to look at cases, I don't think is honest.
No.
Then you go back to California and their inconsistencies. I mean, we could just pick mayors and governors and elected officials being inconsistent. But even with California saying that the film industry is essential in California. Now, granted, yeah, I mean it's a big money maker, but why are they essential? Like they don't have to worry about any of the other limitations and restrictions that gyms and churches and other places, schools have to worry about. The film industry is 100% essential. That's just inconsistent, and to me, that reeks of the why we're not able to get to a place of agreement as Americans. Like, how do we deal with this problem? Because we have our let them eat cake leaders that are just being as inconsistent as possible. Then they just handpick what industries are essential. I've heard people mention like this is the biggest wealth transfer ever. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? How are you coming up with that? All these small businesses that are taking the L and closing down and shutting their doors because they can't stay open. But Walmarts and Targets and Home Depots, these behemoths are able to, and they're going to be able to weather this storm, and they will not come out of there. I'm sorry, those smaller businesses will not come out of here out of it at all, if not unscathed. But Home Depots and Targets and Walmarts, they're going to still be okay. And it's just really odd to see. And it's sad to see also how little it seems like our elected officials really ultimately care about people in real situations. Not saying that cases don't lead to real problems, but simply saying like just because somebody has a case, does that really mean that it's lights out for them?
Yeah, and that's where the courts become so important. And before, it felt like the courts were tending to lean toward backing up the states and the governors. And now with the Supreme Court shift, I really think that's good news for exactly what you're talking about, consistency. And Gorsuch, I thought, really is one, like you said, he's not on Robert's Christmas list, I think is the way that you put it.
No, he's not on the Christmas list.
Yeah, and he said some things that were really, I think, helpful. I think it's here. Gorsuch opined that at least according to Governor Cuomo, it may be unsafe to go to church, but it is always fine to pick up another bottle of wine, shop for a new bike, or spend the afternoon exploring your distal points and meridians. And I also liked how he said here, there is no world in which the Constitution tolerates color-coded executive edicts that reopen liquor stores and bike shops, but shutter churches, synagogues, and mosques. So he's really dealing there with exactly what you're talking about, the inconsistency that a lot of people perceive and seems to be there. And that's a big issue. If the government is going to take restrictions, they have to be consistent. And unfortunately, you really, like you just said, even with the movie industry versus churches and other entities, there just seems to be great inconsistency.
So I do want to look at that. Let's unpack that for a minute, because I think, or rather I feel, that is part of the major problem. Like, how did you determine that liquor stores are essential? Like a liquor store can stay open, a package store can stay open. I can go to a bike shop and it can be open. Now, granted, I think more people should be outside. They need to get more sunlight. They need to get more exercise. I agree with that. But you can go to a bike shop, but you can't go to the gym. You can't do fitness. Okay, if the gym wanted to do some activities in the parking lot, you couldn't do that. but you can go buy a bike, which I'm okay with again. But keep in mind also the acupuncture joke is unregulated. Keep in mind that's closed quarters. I mean, it's not just like you're doing acupuncture in the driveway. Yeah, like you can't do acupuncture social distance. That person is close to you with a needle, inserting it into your body. Why is that okay? Is it the
Because
equal?
acupuncture will magically heal the coronavirus, even if you get it, right?
Okay, uh, okay. And the issue that I've had, and a lot of people brought this up, is that churches, um, you're in church for an hour and a half, 2 hours, you're in close proximity, you're singing, whatever, whatever, so forth. So, okay, I got you. The only problem I have with that is my church has been open and I go to church. I'm not gonna, unless something changes, I'll be at church Sunday. But I thought about it. I was like, I'm only in here with these people for an hour and a half, and we're all cognizant that we need to be nice physical distance, so on and so forth. If somebody has a mask, they treat them with respect and distance. If they don't, give them the fist bump, so on and so forth. In a grocery store, you have countless people, countless surfaces, countless. I am going to go out on a limb here. You really have to convince me that a church is less sanitary in respects to this COVID-19 than a grocery store. I'm sorry. Or a mall or anything else where you're doing a lot of shopping, moving around with lots of people. Because when I'm in church, now we've gotten rid of Sunday school and fellowship hour before church. So it's literally come in, sit, stand, Presbyterians, we sit, stand a couple times and leave. But for the most part, you're not physically interacting with a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, I was just thinking as you said that Presbyterian churches should definitely have less restrictions than many other denominations. I mean, the level of physical proximity and even, loud noises just randomly coming from your mouths is much more limited, I think, in Presbyterian circles than in Baptist circles. We're more likely to spread the coronavirus, I think.
There you go. Well, as you saw those churches that were renaming themselves family-friendly entertainment facility, just change your name from a Baptist church to a Presbyterian, and you're good to go.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's interesting. I know that's a whole nother subject, but I feel like when MacArthur got up that one time and said, "Welcome to Grace Community's peaceful protest,"
yes,
that was really one of the most powerful statements of his whole movement that he's been involved with.
And as many MacArthur sermons as I've watched, that has to be that's the loudest I've ever heard their sanctuary, short of a concert or a Christmas, whatever. I've never heard people in Grace Community clap that long, that hard for anything. Mm-hmm. And again, but I just think that it's inconsistent. And for me, I think we, the people, have to push back as relates to our elected officials doing too much. Because I do want to talk about wherever that point is that Robert made about keeping people up there.
Yeah, I can show that. Yeah. I'd like to read that actually. So this is Gorsuch that Roberts is responding to. And Roberts says that he takes aim at my earlier concurring opinion. Gorsuch had engaged in such overkill that he spent 3 pages criticizing one sentence. And what did that sentence say? Asked Roberts. Only that our Constitution principally entrusts the safety and health of the people to the politically accountable officials of the states to guard and protect. Yeah. Go ahead.
I have no idea where he got that from. Like, I really want us to unpack this, Tim, because how do you that sentence right there basically says that it is the duty and responsibility of my mayor, governor, um, city, state, local council, and of course, national to take care of me.
Yeah,
No.
I know. It's weird because this is coming from Roberts, not someone you would necessarily think would be the most leftist
Right.
in his politics, and yet he's saying exactly what you just said, that essentially if you're getting into the government guarding and protecting your health, that's basically saying they're your parents, is almost, it becomes just a level. And he says that this should be uncontroversial, and I'm thinking, really, that's not controversial?
That's not controversial to you. The idea that it's the state position to take care of me and make sure that I am guarded and protected from a virus with a 99.8% survivability rate. Now, am I saying that if, God forbid, some aliens came from outer space and attacked, that you shouldn't guard and protect? No, I'm not saying that. So don't waste your time even writing that in the comments. What I am saying is that this is not this is not that situation by any means. Even if
Yeah,
you were going to use it, because I guarantee you, watch this. If America was being attacked by radioactive chipmunks from Mars, and we needed the military and the army to take care of it, I'm pretty sure churches would not be arguing that they need to stay open in that regard, or mosques or temples or whatnots. So, because we don't see the immediate danger, and clearly they don't either, because Cuomo was joking about how he's going to go spend time with his family for Thanksgiving. So clearly it's not as bad
yeah,
as you're saying. So either A, it's deathly bad and everybody from top down needs to stay in their house and be under these regulations, or B, it's not, and allow adults to just keep on living, because people are not able to do their jobs, they're not able to maintain their businesses, and therefore there are people who are losing their jobs or losing their livelihood because of this. Miss me with this idea that you're supposed to take care of me. I'm good enough to take care of myself.
yeah. I think where he oversteps the bounds, in my opinion, is when he uses that word health. I'm actually okay to some degree with talking about the government providing safety, because, biblically speaking, even the idea of the government being there to punish evil and that they don't bear the sword in vain. I understand, the government in a sense is to protect us from evil and from harm, but to protect our health, or to be entrusted, as it says there, with our health, that really rubs me the wrong way, because how do you even define health? And it's one thing if you're talking about collectively, a group of people, the government is over us collectively. But when you start getting into health, you're talking about individuals now and our personal rights. And I
Right.
thought in this country, we had the right to basically choose what we do with our health. Now, I understand, like with smoking, it can create a problem for other people around me, but I still have the freedom to smoke on my own in this country, which I don't personally do that, but I have the freedom to do that, and that's bad for my health. So what does he mean that the government has the ability to be entrusted with our health? I mean, that to me is a real problematic statement.
You know, just to jump off, just to run with your idea about smoking that you
Yeah.
use. At the current moment in the United States, as an overall federal understanding, the use of marijuana is illegal. But states have decided and taken it upon themselves that they are going to legalize the usage of, started out as medicinal, now it's recreational. Some just say, just whatever you want to, get down with it. So clearly, we're not concerned about health in that
Mhm.
regard.
Right.
We're not concerned about it. I think we're just concerned whether or not we can tax it. But really, and I forgot what state it was that legalized quite a few other drugs. hardcore drugs just November. So the idea that you're here to protect me from my own decisions,
Right.
miss me with that. Because if that be the case, I could just say, I'm going to stay at home. I'm a self quarantine, as most of us did early this year. We stayed at home, to flatten the curve, 15 days to flatten the curve, so on and so forth. And now I'm like, I feel comfortable moving around. I don't have to, be sharing drinks with strangers and all this kind of stuff. I can just be mindful, but I can go on and keep living my life. It's not going to work. Because if we were all trapped in my house again for another, I don't know how long it was, 6, 7 weeks, there might not be 4 of us coming out of there. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think it's so important when you're talking about health that it is an issue if the government is trying to overstep its bounds when it comes to our health. And I personally think we're headed in that direction. I know that, people want there to be health care for everybody. And I do want for people to be taken care of when they have an illness, if there's something serious. I understand. But at the same time, the government doesn't know the best decision for me as much as I do. And I think this situation we're in right now is a good example of that. It's easy for the government to say what's best for everybody is don't go to church. But that's not necessarily true in every case. There are people like you and me that I think the chances of us really being affected badly, permanently by COVID are, next to nothing. And the bigger issue for you and me would be our overall mental health, and our overall lifestyle, and whether we can work and whether we can be with other Christians when we go to worship. And those are all part of our health too, so I have to ultimately decide for myself what is best for my health. And as far as how it affects other people, I think that's more what the courts are trying to decide here. But you just said it earlier. I mean, the statistics of this disease are not that if it spreads to someone that they're very likely to get seriously ill and die. I mean, the chances, according to the statistics, are very slim, actually. So I just think as time goes on, that is a tougher and tougher case to make. That we can continue to have all of these heavy, tight restrictions, and maybe that's another reason why the Supreme Court is starting to shift.
So 2 points about that. Number one, for everybody that's game for big government, allowing government to do all these altruistic things, to send them my money and they'll take care of everybody.
Yeah.
I want to give you a biblical representation that doesn't work. So John 12:6, actually the whole John 12, but I want to focus on this is when the woman came, Mary anoints Jesus' body before his death. And it reads, start with 4. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was going to betray him, asked, why wasn't this perfume sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor? That's a very noble effort, right?
Yeah.
Sell the perfume that she just dumped all over Jesus' body and give it to the poor. That's a noble request. I don't think anybody would argue that giving something to the poor or helping the poor is not a good idea. But wait, Judas did not say this because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and a keeper of the money bag, and he used to take from it what was put into it. So keep in mind, and well, Jason, you're really going too far. You're going too far saying that my governor is a thief and so forth, or my elected official are a thief. Hey, look what they're doing right now. Look at how they're behaving right now. They're telling you to stay in the house, you do not go to work, you do not go to church, but they can do whatever they want to do and be fine. And they can pick and choose who else can do this. So movie industry, you can go do everything. Gym owners, not so much. Strip clubs, y'all can go do whatever you need to do over there, but Other places, not so much. Liquor stores, not so much. So please do not just throw all of your
Mhm.
hopes into these people because they're sinners just like you and myself. They're sinners and they're going to do what sinners do. Imagine them getting unfettered amounts of money to help the poor. Yeah, just sit there and watch that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we need to make sure we keep things really in the keep the ball in the court of citizens to first of all have responsibility for themselves, but also to care for others, because biblically we are to care for other people. But what happens is exactly what you're saying. We tend to hand that off to the government rather than me being concerned with my neighbor. We'll let the government take care of my neighbor. And what happens is they get more and more power. And it's that power that you're talking about that is dangerous. Um, Another
But
thing too, go ahead.
no, I'm literally about to take another route.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
uh,
Yeah, go
but,
ahead.
but Tim, doing all this is loving your neighbor. You
Hmm.
wearing a mask and gloving up and running when your neighbor comes down the aisle at the grocery store. That's loving your neighbor, right? Isn't that loving them? By treating them like they're unclean, like they have a leopard, like they're lepers. That's loving them. That's loving them.
Loving, I believe, and I think you would agree, means acting in truth.
Mhm.
And sometimes the truth does take time to ascertain. That's why I think we should be reasonable, we should be patient, but we should be open to the truth. And, I actually was going to bring this up. Someone said as a comment on my video that going into a church, to them, it's like going into a dangerous, condemned building. And I think that that's a perception that some people have because of what they've been fed, but it's not necessarily based in factual numbers. Because if you go into a dangerous condemned building, you are really putting yourself at risk, and the percentage of the chances of something happening are really strong. But
Yeah,
if you were to go to church as a healthy person and take reasonable precautions and not be foolish, but be wise and be caring about others, I think that going to church, even during this situation right now, is not really a highly dangerous thing. And that's just the truth.
I'll go this far. I'm gonna just piggyback on that and say I guarantee it's not. It's nothing. I'm sorry. That is just. I'm sorry. You're welcome to email me, jason@jwit.com. That is a lunatic. That's a lunatic statement to say going into a church is like going into a condemned building.
Mm.
I I'm sorry. That doesn't even justify a real honest response. Now, because you still go to Kroger, you still go to the grocery store, you still go to work or wherever else. I guarantee that person who wrote that is not in their closet, locked up, and having have been in there since February or March of this year. It didn't happen. So you're going places where human beings are. You're going to the coffee houses. You're going to get your service
Mhm.
on your vehicle. Please, that was actually insulting. Tim, I'm insulted if somebody insulted you like that. I
That's
mean,
right.
come on.
Please take all complaints to Jason Whitaker. He gave
Right.
you an email, and
And
if you want to, exude negativity, just go right to Jason.
Jason@missme.com. I mean, come on, man. That's just insane. That's not in truth. And I love how you said that. And that's something we really have to
Yeah,
drive home. We're dealing in truth. Now, if
right.
Tim is really sick, the truth is that Tim is sick.
Hmm.
And maybe I don't need to come over and visit him. If he's truly, truly sick and his household is really, really quarantined, maybe I need to stand out on the curb and wave at him and just let him know that we care about him and we're praying for him.
Right.
Send him some e-cards. But
Yep.
if Tim is not sick, there's not. Why am I not? Now, maybe we don't want to be all 25 deep in my house.
Mhm.
maybe that's not the, we've had big Christmas parties in the past. I'm pretty sure we're not gonna have big Christmas parties here. So maybe we're not gonna have 25 people. Okay, fine. Yeah, you can come by, we hang out in the driveway, whatever. But still, being smart and being basically saying that you're guilty until proven innocent, it's just not going to work. That's not a good way to treat people. And I think we're also missing that so many people are not getting that human interaction because we're
Yes.
so used to getting human interaction through this, which is not valid at all. We already know that.
Mm.
So like that one-on-one human interaction, talking about Tim Chalice, we talked about a couple weeks ago,
Mhm.
he needs human interaction. He
That's
doesn't
right.
need to, he doesn't need to read my e-car. He needs somebody to sit with him. And
Mhm.
prayerfully, they're doing well. I pray that they're doing well. But there's a lot of people who need that. And so it's not just um, I need just I just want to go to church because I want to go to a condemned building. Man, that's insane. There's
Yeah,
people interaction.
I know. I think people make arguments out of emotion and they come up with an idea that they think holds water. But that's my point is you really have to take a step back and say, what is the truth? And I know that the truth a lot of times is not as straightforward as people wish it were, because, and we've said it so many times, COVID-19 is dangerous for some people.
Yeah,
So because that's a reality, some people feel like it's all or nothing. You either have to have everybody shut down everything and we have to just take, you know, all of the precautions possible and basically halt life is almost what it feels like. And then you have other people that, I will admit there are some people that just pretty much deny that COVID-19 even exists. It almost seems like there are some people like that. But the truth is that, while it is dangerous for some people, it's it's not really loving, I don't think, ultimately to boil it down to some sort of a generic way of treating everybody. And that's
right.
really the point we've been making over and over. So another issue is masks. And I actually talked about it a while ago on my channel. I saw a sign that someone posted about Jesus telling his followers, if you're really my follower, you will wear a mask. And I think, I get what they're saying and I hear the point about being loving, but what is the truth? Is
What
the truth that masks totally solve all of our problems and prevent disease? Or really are masks something that sometimes are effective to a degree, but sometimes they're really not necessary? And I think that if you make people wear masks all the time, it's not necessarily a loving thing to do.
Oh, I don't think it's loving at all. Now, I'm not. I will wear a mask when I go somewhere that I really want to go and they require a mask. When I want to go in the grocery store, I want to get something out of the grocery store, I'm going to wear a mask. Okay, no problem.
Right.
But I'm not going to turn into that guy. I might rant in the car. My kids tell me I rant too much about it, but I'll take my mask and walk in there and put it on and go do what I'm going to do and keep it moving. So I'm not trying to be that guy. However, as you're saying, is not loving to treat. I just feel like we're treating everybody like they're lepers. Like
Yes.
we've turned the U.S. into a leper colony, and I just don't think that I don't see how that bodes well for us and for people to constantly treat each other like they're unclean. Like
That's right.
I
And
mean,
I think it gets into the issue of unintended consequences because one of the problems potentially with telling people to wear masks and making it sound like that they completely protect you is that masks can only protect you so much. So you
yes,
can give people a false sense of security. And that's one of the unintended consequences, among others, because there are other potential hazards with masks too. I'm not against wearing masks either. I mean, I'm with you. I think there's a time and a place. But I think, you know, that's a good example, though, of how some people think that's the answer to everything, and they judge everybody else by how much they wear their mask. And I,
Mhm.
I think that's not necessarily wise. You know, wearing a mask can help, but there are times where if you have your mask on, it's kind of like, um, you know, I've actually driven motorcycles before, and certainly you're not as secure as you are in a car. But because you're not wearing a seatbelt and you're in the open air, you're extra careful. And so I think with masks, it's the same thing. You still need to make sure you're being careful.
And I want to use the seatbelt discussion because a lot of people say, well, if you don't believe in masks and you don't believe in seatbelts, you wear a seatbelt. Well, seatbelts is actually a standard for seatbelts.
Yeah.
It's actually a standard. So Volvo can't put out a vastly different seatbelt than Honda or Mercedes-Benz. Now they might have different anchor points, blah blah blah, but the material is relatively the same. They have to have certain points. They have to be. Now, if Volkswagen wants to put out a 19-point safety harness, okay, fine. But I think 3 or 5 is the standard, or wherever it's 3. So I think it's a standard, if that makes sense. There's no standard for masks. Come on, man, get out of here. These people making masks out of everything and anything. So don't miss me with the idea that every mask is the same, because they're not. They're not at all. And as you just said, a motorcycle rider is not seat belted in at all. So using the logic that we've been using for the last 9, 10 months, motorcycles should just be outlawed because they have no means, no way of seat belting. So therefore, only things that can have a 3-point seat belt actually should be allowed, and they need to be kept. And that's not the case.
No.
So
Well,
we have to be a little bit more critical in our thinking than what we've been doing. And I feel like lots of people just giving up.
yeah. And getting back to what we have here on the screen about Justice Roberts and him talking about the safety and health being entrusted to the government. And I think it's one thing to talk about safety because safety is a little bit easier to determine. We know that if you get into a car, we know what's safer and what's less safe. Health, though, and health risks are a lot more difficult to determine. So that's what I mean when it comes to if we entrust our health to the government and the government says you have to wear masks 24 hours a day. I know they're not really saying that, but if they kind of start bearing down too much, do they really know what the results of that will be? And if that's actually good for our health? And so I'm very uncomfortable in trusting my health to the government.
Absolutely. Because again, this is the same government that allows smoking. But I mean, they allow everything, they allow all other kind of vices. So what are we doing? So I agree with you. I feel like Tim is capable of determining his own health. You
Now,
have doctors.
I know that the pushback from what I said from some people watching will be that masks are about protecting other people, but this is exactly my point, that masks don't fully protect other people.
There's no
And so
standard.
to be loving, what I really need to be thinking is, am I doing the most I can to care about people around me? If I have a mask on, I need to be aware of how much that mask actually helps. So it's not enough just to say I wear a mask. And actually, kind of the point I'm making, if you're a conscientious person without a mask is probably safer than someone who's really clueless with a mask.
And with one of these little masks they got at the gas station. So because they feel like they're impervious, they feel like they're Superman, Superwoman. And I mean, truly, you are correct. But I want to point out something else because I hear a lot of people say this. What would Jesus do? I said, I think that's a great question.
Mm.
Rather than say, what would Jesus do? And we're going to be hypothetical. Let's look at what he did with the man who was paralytic and was let down through the tiles by his friends. Um, it's in Luke chapter 5. Feel free to pull it up yourself. I'm going to jump toward the middle of the story where the friends have already removed the tiles from the house and they've lowered the man down right in front of Christ. But finding no way to bring him in because of the crowd, they went up onto the roof and let him down on his bed through the tiles into the midst before Jesus. And when he saw their faith, he said to the man, "Man, you are healed of COVID." No, I'm sorry. Man, you got all your, no, he didn't say that either. He said, "Man, your sins are forgiven you." The first, it's clear the man is sick. It's clear as day. The man is paralyzed, coming down from the ceiling. And the first thing Jesus did was not heal his body. He was concerned about his spiritual well-being and his soul. And he said, "Man, your sins are forgiven you." And I know it says that. I was just being silly. So then the scribes and they're over there like, "Man, who does he think he is? How dare he say these things?" And the scribes and the Pharisees began questioning, "Who is this who speaks these blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" When Jesus perceived their thoughts, because he knew what they were thinking, he answered them, "Why are you questioning these things in your heart? Which is easier, your sins are forgiven, or to say, rise and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." So his thumbnail, his proof positive that he can forgive sins was what he's about to do. He said to the man who was still paralyzed, mind you, "I say to you, rise up, pick up your bed, and go home." So the first thing he did was not heal the man. He gave him what he truly needed, which was spiritual healing.
Mhm.
So in all honesty, that man was good to go. He could have stayed paralyzed, but he was good that his spirit, his soul had been saved. So as we're looking at this situation and how Christians should respond or are responding to COVID-19, we got to deal with truth, as you said, Tim. What is the truth? These people need salvation. Our governors, our elected officials, our neighbors, we need salvation far more than we need protection from COVID or the next disaster that's going to come down the pike.
Mm-hmm.
We need salvation. And I just think that we need to be mindful of that as Christians and not let that slip past us, get so caught up in, Supreme Courts and whether liquor stores are open or where I get that fake mask from or whatever. But really remember that we're here as witnesses to share a truth that will literally make someone who's spiritually definitely sick, make them well.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, that's right. And it's easy to get sidetracked. And I do think we live in a culture that is so earthly minded and physically minded, and it's all about our physical health and our physical existence. And I think the church even can get caught up into that mindset. And as Paul said, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And that's the way we will discern and approve of God's will, is we have to be renewed in our mind, because yeah, it is about spiritual things. It's about people's spiritual well-being, not just their physical well-being. And that is exactly where church comes in. I mean, that is, one of the reasons we're here, to worship God and then also to share the message of truth in the gospel. So
hence why it's important that we're able to do that. Just like
that's right. That's right. And that's exactly where I was going is I have heard some criticism too, looking at comments of people just saying, and I understand where they're coming from. They'll criticize MacArthur, for example, and say, well, it's not safe for him to have his church meeting like that. And the church is not a building. That's kind of the argument you'll hear. And I think John MacArthur would agree that the church is not a building, but what he would disagree with and what he would add to that, obviously, is that the church is an assembly.
Yeah.
That's by definition what the church is. It is a people who are assembling together. That is actually what the original word means. So you cannot have a church if a church is not gathered together. Now,
You can't have
some
an online church?
what was that?
I can't have an online church? I can't have the Jason online church?
And that's what I was going to bring up, is that some people will say, you know, you can still meet in other ways. And I do think that to some degree is true, but you still see in the Bible sometimes the church clearly desired to meet with as many of the church members locally as they possibly could. And you take the church in Jerusalem, they were not just meeting all the time in little groups. There were times where they were gathered together in larger settings. And that's because we are a group. It's like the family. I've talked about that before. You don't just want to see your family from a distance. You want to be with your family. And that's the same with the people of God. They want to be with each other. And I think there's a biblical case to be made for that. The problem is that, and we're talking about this in these videos, the government, it's one thing for the government to say, look, there is a certain situation that is going to prevent you from meeting for the next month because it's truly unsafe. Yeah. But when the government says, we're not sure how safe it is, and you can't meet until we're not sure. Well, now we have to say, wait a second, how are we going to even function the way that God wants us to if we don't have the government giving us any clear parameters? And I think that's the situation John MacArthur was facing.
And you know, let's use California as an example. Well, you know what? Let me back up, because you said something about family, and I think that was great. And for those persons that are, you know, keyboarding in the comments, keyboard warring in the comments right now, how did that Thanksgiving go with your grandma having to try to fiddle around with FaceTime? How did that work? Did that work well? Did that work well to not be able to see your uncle and your aunt that you really love to see because you forced them to go online, and your favorite cousin that you and him sit around and yuck it up for hours upon hours? How did that go? Was that enjoyable to do FaceTime family meeting and not to get your favorite, you know, your granddad is out there frying a turkey and your aunts and cousins making a big meal in the kitchen and all those smells and all that kind of stuff like that? How did that work? Because it probably, I think we're all understanding that it didn't work. It didn't go. That's the exact same thing we're talking about with church. Now, granted, these are not my biological family, but they're people who are in the body of Christ in faith with me, and I like seeing them. And just seeing their little face on a Brady Bunch Zoom gallery is not the same as being able to converse with them and talk with them. And my wife talks to them and their kids are chatting over there and we can just dialogue and catch up. That's different. And so therefore, that's why I think many states, by locking down Thanksgiving, help make the case why we need to go back to church, because it's not the same. You can't. Zoom Thanksgiving dinner, I know, was a fail. I don't care what you tell me. I don't care what you tell me. Zoom Thanksgiving dinner was not a win. And that's exactly what we're saying. Now, are there situations where it was probably necessary? Yes, you got a cousin that's serving overseas. You got an aunt who's in the hospital. You got somebody who's elderly and can't travel. That makes sense. And yes, there's a reason for that. Then yeah, get online, FaceTime with us. We can all sing happy birthday or whatever and whatever with you. But as a rule or as an overall, we want everybody with us. The same thing with church. That's it. We want to gather together. We're still family, even though we're not in the same building. But we want to be together as a family.
That's right. That's good.
Get me in trouble today, man. We get a lot of
today,
man.
Well, I appreciate your feedback on all this, and you know, I know that when people give comments, a lot of people are actually very positive and are actually affirming, which is great. Other people do say things that are, oppositional, but I think some of that is just, those are the most vocal people, they're probably the most emotionally reactive on the other side. But, I think there's a lot of people that are kind of more in the middle and are just trying to sort out things. And the truth is, and we talk about the word truth, that's very important. The truth is we don't always know the full truth. I actually heard something today, and I don't want to just make up conspiracies and conjectures, but it was an interesting thing that someone said there was a study done, and there's evidence that COVID was, I think, in this country possibly at the end of 2019, which is really interesting if it was, because it just shows you that we don't really know. We just kind of understand things based on what the media tells us, based on things that we've heard, based on our own experiences. But the truth is, in life, there are a lot of unknowns. And I think for us to get to the truth, we have to, one, be open-minded and not just constantly set in our own way of thinking, but we also have to be willing to dialogue, which is what you and I are doing. It helps us to be edified and to really get closer to the truth. And the Bible says that the church is a group of people who speak the truth in love. And so that's very important. And getting back to our initial topic, I think that it is important for the church at times, to just say within the bounds of our country's legal system that the government needs to be held accountable. And the Supreme Court is actually starting to agree more and more with churches that are saying the truth is that the government is not being consistent. And the truth is that the government in certain situations is being overly restrictive. And that is not, it's not healthy, and it's not loving, and it's not good for us, not only physically, but more importantly, spiritually.
I agree. And I would only add that um, we're talking about churches and Supreme Court siding with churches. And I would just encourage people to not check out because maybe they're not, maybe you're not a believer, maybe you're not a Christian at all, or you maybe don't attend any kind of religious facility or gathering. I wouldn't just say, oh, well, that's just them, let them deal with it. I think we should all look at this and say, wait. I think everybody should look at this and say, wait, why are we allowing our government to overreach this far? Like they're going way out past their duties and responsibilities. Why are we allowing that? So don't just say, oh, well, churches are fighting it out, but we don't have, no, I think everybody should look at it and call them to account and say, wait, hold on, pump the brakes. Why are we not able to do this? Like for real, why do we have curfews? So COVID doesn't happen at 10:01. So nobody can get COVID at 10:01. I'm sorry, between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. in the morning, but they can get it at 5:02 in the morning. Man, miss me with that. Like I think it shouldn't just be Christians and people of faith and people in religious institutions that are like saying, hey, hold it. I think we should all, and I think that's because we should be encouraging everyone to love truth to the point that we're like, hey, wait, that's not true. Hold on. You're trying to tell me at 12:01 somebody can't get COVID because I'm at the house? Man, get out of here. But we need to have some questions. So that's just my.
Totally agree. And I think that to back up what you're saying, to bolster it, is that the churches, the Christians are really in a unique position, I think, to be more predisposed really to accept truth and to proclaim what is true and to stand for what is true. When it comes to the government, for example, we have as Christians the advantage of not needing to trust humans as much as people that are not Christians. You
Right.
know what I mean? We know as Christians that there are limits to how much the government can really do and really how much they should do. But
Right.
ultimately, because we trust God. So that's helpful. And then also because we do believe in absolute truth. We don't believe that truth is based on our own individual perceptions and feelings. So I think for those reasons, we can kind of lead the way, even in a situation like this. I agree. I think it's not just Christians who should be concerned with the truth and how to deal with things truthfully, but I think Christians have a unique ability to just latch onto the truth very quickly, and even to be more quick to hold government accountable when it's not being truthful. And hopefully we'll see even people that are not Christians coming alongside and being supportive. And I think there's evidence of that. I think that there are people that are not Christians who are very sympathetic toward things that some of the church leaders are saying. And also to broaden this out more, it isn't just a Christian concern. It's a concern for all people in our country, because there are so many people, as you pointed out earlier, who own small businesses. And so when churches stand up and say, we've got to be truthful and the government cannot be overbearing, that's not only for our good as churches, it's also for the protection of people that are business owners and people that are trying to do their jobs and make a livelihood for their family.
And even in this article, it does say, I think it's the Roman archdiocese and like two Jewish temples, I think, that
Yeah,
are involved in the case. So yeah, I mean, they're not all Christians anyway. But
that's
to the
right.
point that you're making, I think gym owners should be making noise. Like, hey, if you're saying, if the truth is that COVID adversely affects people who are less active, then why are we not being allowed to help keep people active?
Yeah,
Like, I mean, that should almost be, it should almost go hand in hand. Like, you should be encouraging people to go to the gym, giving stipends for gyms to stay open longer so they can get these people active and moving, physically distant, if they have to wear masks, whatever.
right.
But keeping them moving, keeping them active, because if the truth is that people who have too much weight or people who are not as active or is not as physically able, they're going to have a harder time, then it would just make sense to lower the amount of people that could possibly get it by getting them active. But you shut down parks and they can't even go walk on a walking trail. Like, why are we not letting people sit on the go on the walking trail? Why? So I think all of us need to, and when I say all of us Americans need to be like, hey, wait, hold on. Time out. And start asking some more questions.
That's right.
And I don't think that that's wrong. I don't think that's bad. I don't think that's evil to ask questions and say, hey, you're saying this thing is so terrible.
Mm.
It's so terrible that if I just go home and stay at the house for 2 weeks, my body will beat it. Then why am I worried about a vaccine? Come on. Like, I think we need to ask some more poignant questions and not just allow our government to just go do whatever they want to do and inflict on us such a level of pressure and such a level of discomfort that people's business, they're losing their livelihood, they're not able to take care of their families and so forth. Because coming out of this, I mean, I know quite a few small businesses that have already closed. You know, if this keeps going on, what's going to happen to them?
Yeah.
So, all right, that was my.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I guess to reiterate what I've been saying, I think it just shows you why it is a problem when we entrust the health of our individual, uh, persons to the government. It is a real problem because the government, as we see in this situation, in the name of health, ends up doing things that are not very healthy. It is not healthy to be inside constantly, not moving, and it's certainly not healthy to your overall well-being when you completely lose your livelihood and have no more means of income because you lost your business. And I understand, you know, we all want to try to be safe,
Yes.
and I think everybody agrees. But at some point, when the government just starts to put all of these restrictions in place, it goes too far. And so I am really, really personally, I am encouraged by the direction of the Supreme Court.
And I agree with that. I agree. And hopefully we'll start pushing this thing in the correct direction, or at least get a course correction so we
Yep.
can start seeing a little bit of, because again, you even hear people talking about canceling Christmas and all this kind of stuff like that. Like, come on, man.
Mm.
Get out of here.
Yeah. Well, Christmas will not be canceled in its truest sense, right?
Definitely not that.
That's good. Well, thank you so much, Jason.
Hey, no
You
problem.
are
Thank you.
always just a pleasure and an encouragement to talk to, and love hearing your thoughts. So thank you so much for talking with me about the Supreme Court and all of these interesting issues.
Hey, I'm glad I could help you out. Thank you for having me on today.
All right, thanks.
Take
God
care.
bless.